My heart broke as I threw the chopped remains of my father's old chair into the fire. But I had no other choice. It was the only thing keeping my wife and 2 sons alive. The smoldering oak remains of the handmade furniture didn't provide heat for long, and soon after, the temperature inside the cabin dropped below 10 degrees Fahrenheit. My shivering wife whispered to our 2 sons, "It'll be okay. Daddy will think of something." But it was clear in her voice she didn't put much faith in those words. My sons didn't seem to believe it either, and I felt like I wasn't their hero anymore. I had failed them. Their prepper dad, who always had a plan B for disaster, had let them down. Let me tell you, there is nothing worse for a man than to watch your family suffer and not be able to do a damn thing about it. Instead, I felt ashamed. Deeply ashamed. The generator was new, barely a year old and still under warranty, but it had failed me and, in turn, I had failed my family. Before I continue, let me introduce myself real quick. My name is James Miller. A couple of years ago, I was still what you'd call a suburban prepper, married with 2 kids and a garage full of rations. As a kid, I grew up on my father's farm during the Red Scare in the 60s. My dad, God bless his soul, was one of the 404,000 veterans who fought in both World War II and Korea. Harsh but honest. The type of guy they don't seem to make anymore. He was also what you would call a true homesteader or survivalist. Yet he never described himself as such. For him, it was simply common sense. If you want to know what he was like, just imagine a survivalist MacGyver mixed with a bit of Clint Eastwood grit. He was tremendous with his hands, as many men from that generation were, and he designed and built many things on his own, from improvised power generators, like windmills and water wheels to get off the grid, to food gardens and different ways to preserve and store said food, such as dehydrators and root cellars, water wells, and rainwater collection systems for watering and hygiene too. He even made his own crossbow so he could silently hunt down prey in the woods. These projects had a similar theme. They were all made from easy-to-find materials and with basic tools. My dad didn't even have a workshop. But his most ambitious project was a fully self-sufficient log cabin in the mountains, made entirely by himself. A sort of off-the-grid getaway in case the commies invaded and the nukes started dropping. And when my father lay on his deathbed decades later, he grabbed me by the collar, he was still strong as a bull moose, and said, "James, my son, take care of the cabin. Take care of it, not just for your sake, but for your children too. I found peace there, so whenever you need it, you'll find it there too." To this day, his words still move me and drive me to make him proud. Not only did he give me the cabin, but he also handed me his notebook with all of his projects inside. Years before, he tried to get it published, but a greedy publisher ran off with all of his money and his dream to help Americans get more self-reliant. He hoped one day I'd succeed where he had failed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, one day, not long after my father passed, I took my wife and 2 kids to the cabin. Since it was old-school self-reliant, completely off-grid, I thought it'd be a great experience for my suburban kids. When we left on Saturday morning, the weather report warned of light snow in the area. Heck, I thought, maybe this isn't such a good idea. But the excitement my kids had in the days leading up to the weekend turned out to be contagious. And besides, the cabin had a stove and an ample supply of firewood to keep us warm. But if anything happened, I had some contingency plans in my truck. Everything would be fine, I told myself. So, after a 5-hour drive through light snow, we drove up the dirt road leading to the cabin, when suddenly the snow became fierce. In typical fashion, the weather report was off, way off, and that light snow turned out to be nothing short of a full-blown blizzard. I tried to turn back, but it didn't take long for the truck to get stuck. We had to get out before we were snowed in. Fortunately, we were close to the cabin, so we made a run for it. Then, after 800 yards or so, we spied the cabin when suddenly something caught my eye that made my stomach drop. The firewood supply was gone. A brief investigation showed some cigarette butts around the crime scene. Someone had stolen my wood. Desperate locals, greedy thieves, or who knows, maybe a gun-grabbing Democrat who mistook the firewood for assault rifles. But back then, I wasn't in a joking mood. Luckily, there was a plan B. See, as a prepper, I always had a backup plan, which in this case were a portable generator and an electric space heater I had stashed in my truck, my BOV. In hindsight, a gas generator would have been better, but I was still young. So, after I tucked my family under some blankets in a small room, and threw some newspapers in my dad's old stove to keep them warm, I set out to face the white hell outside and came back, after what felt like an excruciating hour, with the generator and heater. I put the generator on the porch, hooked everything up, and a couple of moments later, the heater buzzed into action. Relieved and exhausted, we fell asleep on our mattress in the smallest room we could heat, when suddenly, in the night, my youngest woke me up. "Dad, I'm freezing." "Then go to sleep next to the heater," I said. "But it's off." It was then I noticed the generator wasn't making any noise. Immediately, I rushed outside and tried to restart it, but to no avail. What the heck was wrong with this thing? Frustrated, I tried to start it again. Then I kicked it. Next, I pled with it. Finally, I begged God. But still, the generator stayed silent. Defeated, I headed back into the cabin and watched as the thermometer dropped and kept dropping. See, I made a mistake. I relied too much on a piece of technology to save our butts. Now, I'll tell you what happened next in just a minute, but I need to rant about this serious issue first. It's something my dad talked a lot about, and something he often criticized me for. Because when I used a freezer to preserve my food, my dad used a root cellar filled with food he dehydrated and/or freeze-dried himself. While I got my power through an expensive power utility company, my dad generated his own electricity for free. And while I got my water, mainly from the mains, which the government could shut down whenever they wanted, my dad collected his own ground and rainwater. All this stuff I used is convenient and easy. But there are also things I can't do without. And the fact that these items are overly complicated means regular Joes, like me, can't get a handle on it when things go south. And most of the time, it's no problem. When a product stops working, you can just take it back to the store to get it repaired, or call an expensive repair guy. Sometimes they'll say this: "I guarantee everyone has heard this before. It's not worth repairing. You're better off buying a new one." And while annoying, it's not a big deal when times are good. We just suck it up and go with the flow, just like the manufacturer intended. But when times are bad, like in my cabin, and our survival literally depends on this equipment, then buying a new one is simply not an option. But this fragility of products and how they're designed to fail wasn't always the problem it is today. Don't you ever get the same feeling as me, that previous generations were just much better with their hands? They could repair everything, sew their own clothes, and build projects with nothing more than a hammer, some nails, and the plans stored in their heads. So, it was with my dad at least, who, as I told you, was part of what they call the greatest generation. They lived through several wars and the Great Depression and gave us the liberty we all enjoy today. And I always felt incompetent when I compared my dad's skills to mine. How he could fix almost anything. Almost. Because even he struggled with what he'd call modern crap. He basically listed 5 problems these modern products have. Complicated. Modern products are often over-engineered, making it impossible for common people like me to repair when things go south. Some companies, like Apple, even use special pentalobe screws, which need a specific, impossible-to-find screwdriver, making it harder for people to open their devices. The more complicated a system is, the easier it breaks. And when a complicated system breaks, it is much harder to fix. Expensive. The projects are made from cheap materials you can find in any corner hardware store. In case of the SHTF, these materials can also be scavenged, and needed tools are basic, so no expensive workshops are needed. My dad believed in giving the common blue-collar hero a fighting chance. Rigid. Manufacturers don't like you tinkering with their products and possibly making them better, because why would you buy their new products if you were able to improve them yourself? Just look at how many devices there are where you can't even replace the battery. Fragile. There are 2 reasons companies make their products flimsy and incapable of dealing with stress. First, because they use weak materials to cut costs. Therefore, while the product works in good conditions, this means a slight change in the environment is often fatal. Unreliable. The second reason is some manufacturers do it deliberately. So, it'll eventually break and force you to buy a new one. This concept is called planned obsolescence, and it's got major tech companies like Apple and Samsung in trouble with the law before. So, there I was in the cabin, sitting on the floor in the dim light with the broken generator in front of me, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Meanwhile, my family was freezing, and so was I, to be honest. The only thing we could burn was the furniture, old oak chairs, and tables my father had made. We chopped up one chair and threw it into the stove, something which still pains me to this day. But the warmth it gave us only lasted a moment. So instead of burning yet another chair, I went outside and into the shed next to the cabin to look for fewer precious things to burn. This was the old shed my dad used to store his tools and smaller projects. As I dug through them, one of them caught my eye. It was an old improvised generator made from car parts. Surely it wouldn't work, right? It hasn't run in probably 10 years or so and was covered in a thick layer of dust. But it was worth a try. I fueled her up and put some grease on the moving parts, then took her out to the deck. Then I pulled the rope start. Nothing. Second pull. Nothing still. My doubt increased, but I still had hope. Third pull. The generator struggled at first, but eventually, like Frankenstein's monster, it was alive. As soon as I had hooked it up to the space heater's cable, I could hear a magical sound from inside the cabin. Cheering. When I entered, my wife and sons were dancing around the space heater like cavemen who had just discovered fire. In the end, my wife and kids fell asleep again around the heater while I kept watch. But my dad's generator did its job and kept running. As we got rescued from our snowed-in cabin the next day by a half-track, my wife whispered in my ear, "My hero." And after the weekend, my kids at school boasted to the other kids about their old dad. By the way, I still use my dad's faithful generator even now, 9 years later. But this whole incident got me thinking about the things in my house. Not just my generator, but other things I relied on and used for prepping. Stuff like my food dehydrator, my solar power system, my expensive water well. All of these were built or installed by other people and rather complex. If they went down, I didn't have a clue how to fix these or adapt them to new situations. And while I was thinking of this, it dawned on me. I need to replace the modern, complicated machines, which I depended on my life and my family's, with simple, lasting alternatives, like my dad's old generator. Do you remember me telling you about my dad's notebook, which he gave to me on his deathbed? Now, all those projects he wrote down in this notebook, including clear instructions, required materials and tools, and precise measurements. It was a real treasure trove. My dad saw the value as well and tried to publish his guide as a printed book. He didn't care much about money. That was just an extra. For him, the most important thing was to get this information out to other people so they could be more self-reliant and independent from the system. But unfortunately, the publisher he worked with turned out to be a low-life scammer who liked to take advantage of an old man. He stalled the project deliberately for years, and he kept asking my dad for more money to pay for his expenses. Yes, that's right. My dad paid him to show how much he wanted to have this on the market and into people's homes. "Don't worry about these investments," the scammer had said. "Once this gets out, you'll make it back tenfold." After a few years, the publisher vanished without a trace, with all my dad's money and his dream. So that's why, when he was on his deathbed, he wanted me to have the cabin and his prized notebook. Not just for me and my family, but perhaps to help others as well. After what happened in the cabin, I looked in the notebook and was surprised to see a crude drawing of a familiar friend. It was the same generator that saved my family's lives. My dad had written down all the materials for the generator, the basic tools, and easy-to-understand plain English instructions on how to make it. So, after a quick trip to the local hardware store to get some of the materials, I decided to recreate the generator which had powered my space heater. It shocked me how easy it was. Even for someone like me, a suburban prepper with little to no DIY experience, it was simple and straightforward. I mean, after just an afternoon, I had already finished the project using an old lawnmower engine. Excited, I tried to remake some of the other projects my dad had noted down and put some time aside on lazy Sunday afternoons. Again, the instructions were so simple, I believed even my youngest son could have had a good shot at building them all by himself. And it's how I was able to complete an underground greenhouse to grow my own food on my first try as a DIY newbie. Plus, I dug my own water well and made a filter so I can get clean water to my home with cheap, everyday tools and materials. Finally, for a bit of fun, I recreated my father's crossbow. My boys were really happy with that one. All the projects follow my dad's SCARR principle. For him, this was the key to success. Simple, easy to make, understand, and repair. This is not only great for you to work, maintain, and adapt, but also when you need to instruct others, like your children or grandchildren, to do their bit. Cheap. You can make these projects from cheap materials you can find in any corner hardware store. In the case of SHTF, these materials can even be scavenged. The needed tools are basic, so no expensive workshops are needed. My dad believed in giving the common blue-collar hero a fighting chance. Adaptable. The projects can be easily modified to suit the new or unknown conditions they may face. For example, if you need more power from your generator, you can add a bigger engine. This allows you to be on top of any situation and grow your projects according to your needs. Resilient. These are not flimsy and fragile, like the store-bought versions they're meant to replace. The materials, while cheap, are picked to be strong and durable. The designs themselves adhere to the same principle, to ensure they can withstand the elements. Reliable. The simple designs without any fluff means the projects are dependable. The more complex you make a design, the more can go wrong with it. By using only the essentials, you end up with a project which takes a beating and keeps on going. Now, when my dad tried to get this book published, I was too young to understand the value. But now, I saw firsthand how groundbreaking this book was. I mean, it was so good even for me, someone who is all thumbs and has always been on the clumsy side, could make these projects. I decided to make my dad's dream come true. Only, I didn't feel qualified to vet the designs. Neither did I have much experience publishing books. That's why I contacted the most respected expert I know, survival instructor Mark Johnson, also known as Cache Valley Prepper. This guy's incredible. He doesn't just talk the talk. With enough food, water, and gear to host a fully functional battalion on his own off-grid retreat, plus his own electrical generators, Mark's forgotten more than I'll ever know after pleasantly retiring from his self-started IT company to teach survival skills full-time, volunteer as the program manager of his local CERT, Community Emergency Response Team, and teach at events like PrepperCon, where I've seen him receive several standing ovations. Together, we built and noted down all my dad's designs and verified them for safety. Even this hardcore dude was impressed with them, which made me so proud of my old man. Some of these notes were about 20 years old at this point, and while still relevant, we decided to update them to fit new materials and tools where applicable. We even added a few popular projects, like the Wallapini greenhouse and square foot garden, but gave them the SCAR treatment so they'd be simple, cheap to make, adaptable, resilient, reliable. Next, I wanted the best possible illustrations for each of the projects. While my dad's explanations were good enough on their own for me to do them, I still work best when I see what I need to do, especially with pictures and diagrams showing exactly what the product should look like in each stage. It's what makes assembling IKEA furniture so easy, right? I was blessed to find a professional illustrator and a fellow prepper to work together with us. His name was Lex P. Andrews, an architect. He studied and built my dad's projects along with us and took drawings throughout. For each project, Lex drew highly detailed, simple diagrams with one objective. A child should be able to look at them and understand what to do. Just look at some of these. Finally, as the cherry on top, we teamed up with the experts of Survivalpedia to publish this guide. Survivalpedia is one of the most popular prepper and survivalist websites on the web, with thousands of articles and experts. They ask their readers, who are both intermediate and experienced preppers, homesteaders, and survivalists, what type of DIY projects they wanted to see. That's why we only cover the subjects that are really useful to people with survival in mind and avoid useless fluff. At last, after 6 months of hard work, we finally finished my dad's dream. Survival Sanctuary, 25 quick and easy projects for your off-grid escape, featuring everything you need to make your home or bug-out location self-reliant, full of high-quality diagrams and easy-to-follow instructions. So how does this differ from the other programs out there? Well, the reason I wanted to publish my dad's DIY manual was because all the other information out there suffered from several problems. These were my 3 major gripes with other books and internet resources. Too broad, with hundreds of pages full of overwhelming info and projects. Most of the content also often felt copied straight from the most popular survival handbooks. Too elite, because it's told by gurus who think you're a master craftsman with a workshop full of specialized and expensive tools. Too vague, with missing instructions, wrong measurements, and low-quality pictures, or sometimes even no visuals at all. And of course, most of these projects don't follow SCARR. They're made with specialized materials and tools you can only get in a well-functioning society. If times are good, those designs work since parts can be found online or in specialized stores. This is exactly why I wanted to publish Survival Sanctuary and combat all the low-quality effort. Lex and I focused on these things. Narrow it down to the best tried and tested DIY off-grid projects you can do to make a truly self-sufficient home without any of the fluff those classic manuals are riddled with, like stories and opinions. Make it as accessible as possible with easy instructions even a child could understand, and with both accurate imperial and metric measurements. Be precise by telling you exactly what you need, down to the size of the vise, and with high-quality diagrams our architect Lex made specifically for these projects. Here's a glimpse at what you'll find. Chapter 1. 4 easy ways to generate your own electricity at home. Remember the story I told you earlier about my failed generator and how my dad's old, dusty one saved the day? Now you can build my father's improvised generator yourself in just one afternoon. In the first chapter of this book, we'll teach you an easy method to build your own generator from used car parts. But since relying on only one source to fulfill your needs isn't part of the anti-fragile philosophy, there are also 3 other projects to satisfy your energy needs. A windmill, able to generate 100 watts 24/7. If there's wind, this windmill can generate power day and night. It's a set up and forget method of collecting energy, which can be stored straight away into batteries. Near running water? Then you can build a power source to supply you with electricity 24/7. Our water mill is perfect and highly modular, so you can even modify it to take on other tasks like powering a grain mill, lumber mill, power hammer, and more. Finally, this book contains a full project on how to set up your own home solar power system. After you get the material from a hardware store, you can get started without the help of an expensive electrician. What's so fantastic about using renewable energy from wind, water, and the sun is that it's infinite. Therefore, I recommend building several of these power generators so you can have unlimited, free energy. Chapter 2. Growing your own food in small spaces. Have you heard about the food crisis in Venezuela, following its collapse due to the socialist regime? As a result of the crisis, people started to grow their own food right in the middle of the city. They do that on patches of land, balconies, and even on the rooftops of apartment buildings. It's amazing how you can grow food almost anywhere, and that's what this chapter will teach you. We've got 4 popular gardening projects for you that are prepper favorites. The Underground Wallapini Greenhouse. It's based on the Benson Institute's design, and through this book, you can recreate it the way my father built it. Lex's easy-to-read designs complete the chapter and can't be found anywhere else. In this book, you'll find a diagram which will provide the minimum year-round needs of an entire family. The biggest advantage of this type of greenhouse is you can grow summer vegetables like tomatoes, bananas, and nutritious avocados, even in winter. This is because its design harnesses and stores the heat from the sun while not being as fragile as a typical glass greenhouse. This makes this type of greenhouse ideal for generating barterable goods when good old cash has lost its value. Plus, this design follows our trademark anti-fragile philosophy, so you can make yours from the readily available materials which are all listed in the Survival Sanctuary. A wicking bed. This raised bed garden is watered from below by placing it on top of a water reservoir. Compared to a conventional raised bed, this wicking bed only needs to be watered once every 2 to 3 weeks. Their efficiency also means they use up to 50% less water than with conventional gardening, which makes it perfect for dry climates or when water is scarce. Get started with the easiest form of gardening out there, the vertical garden. Not only is this type of garden ideal for small spaces, like apartment balconies, but its height-based nature also means you don't have to bend over all the time when you're planting and harvesting. Vertical gardening is ideal for smaller plants like medical plants or herbs. Plus, because of its height, it's also very resistant to the usual pests that plague other gardens. Our final gardening project is the square foot garden. As the name implies, it's a type of garden where the soil is divided up into areas of a square foot. This encourages you to use less fertilizer and have a garden that's easier to manage due to its concentrated nature. It's perfect for bigger crops, like cabbage and potatoes, and you can combine it with the Wallapini greenhouse to grow easy-to-manage summer crops in winter. Chapter 3. How to preserve and store your food. Growing food is just part of the equation. The other is storing it. Devices such as dehydrators, freezer dryers, and more commonly, traditional fridges and freezers are all good ways to make perishable food last longer. But as we have learned during this presentation, all of these can eventually fail. Luckily, my dad made SCARR alternatives, meaning they are simple, cheap, adaptable, resilient, and reliable. And what's even better is none of these 3 methods require any electricity to run. This makes them very easy and safe to make. Introducing, replace your electric dehydrator with a DIY low-cost solar dehydrator. Use the free power of the sun to quickly and efficiently dry your foods so they'll last for years. Perfect to preserve all those fruits and veggies and herbs you've grown through your greenhouse and anti-fragile gardening systems. Did you know freeze drying is the best way to keep your stored food high grade for long periods of time, with almost no loss in nutritive value and flavor? Unfortunately, store-bought freeze dryers are expensive and suffer from the same fragility as many other commercial products. Luckily, you can now build your own freeze dryer with just some basic tools. With this device, you can easily create rations to store in your bug-out bag or bug-out vehicle. Put the freeze-dried food in some water, and it'll look just like it did years ago before you put it in your homemade dryer. The root cellar is one of the oldest known methods of storing food and is still a very effective one, which is why it's so popular with homesteaders, preppers, and enthusiasts of traditional culture. Best used for storing vegetables, fruits, nuts, and other foods. But our design comes with a twist, as it also doubles as an underground bunker for you and your family. Chapter 4. A simple and cheap alternative to air conditioning. Working on your projects and gardening, it often involves some physical labor. That's why it's important to keep the area you work and live in cool. Now, you can do this with traditional air conditioning, but these are very maintenance heavy and prone to breaking. That's why my dad made his own cooling units based on an ancient principle of using terracotta and water. In this chapter, I'll tell you exactly how to make your own cheap air coolers. They're so cheap to make and efficient to run, plus you can put one in every room for maximum cooling. Chapter 5. Collecting and storing water off-grid. Just like with our electrical grid and grocery food, we are dependent on our water supply network. But again, this system is incredibly fragile. Water is not just for drinking, but also for hygiene like washing food, clothes, and even ourselves. In 2018, the South African city of Cape Town faced a major crisis. After 3 years of droughts, the city's water supply was threatening to run dry. As a result, the city was prepping for day zero, the day the water taps would be turned off. Luckily for them, the day never came, as 90 days before day zero, rains ended the drought. But we don't even have to look far away from home. Remember the 2015 drought in California? Or the crisis in Flint, Michigan, where the city folk couldn't use tap water for years? All this teaches us the importance of collecting and storing your own water. And this chapter teaches you how with 5 simple projects. One of the easiest methods to get free water to your home is by tapping into groundwater with a simple water well. However, asking an expert to dig your well is expensive. Plus, if the well fails, it's best you know how to make it operational again on your own, or how to dig a new one at a different location. That's why we include an easy method for a DIY water well, so you can give your home, bug-out location, or off-grid homestead quick access to water. Next up, we have our modular rainwater collection system. This simple design collects rainwater efficiently and locks it into self-sealing tanks. As a result, you can easily take a tank out of the system and move it to wherever the water is needed. For example, a toilet tank, or as a firefighting precaution. To make all that collected ground and rainwater ready for consumption, you need to remove harmful products. That's where the biosand filter comes into play. It removes heavy metals, bacteria, viruses, and more from water, which makes it safe to use for cooking, washing, and drinking after treatment. Collect rainwater fast with this cheap and easy-to-build cistern. The cistern itself is made from a culvert, a common piece of equipment you can easily source in an emergency. Cisterns are extremely valuable to collect rainwater passively and in large volumes. It's also recommended to keep at least one cistern exclusively for emergencies like firefighting, since the water can make the difference between life and death. Plus, no more need for a plumber, because you'll make your own pipe system and hydraulic ram pump with our very simple design. After implementing this system, you'll be able to pump all that collected water around your home straight into a toilet, sink, and garden. Chapter 6. Build your own radio. In a crisis, information is key. Knowing where to collect drinking water, which rescue operations are being conducted, or weather info is vital in a survival situation. This info is often broadcast over the radio waves, so it's always handy to keep a radio stocked for such an event. But again, what if it breaks, or you can't power it anymore? Here's a solution from World War II. It's called a POW, or foxhole radio. And you don't even need any power to operate it, making it ideal for crisis situations. As the name implies, prisoners of war in World War II built these radios out of easily sourced materials so they could listen in on local radio stations. Soldiers in the field built them too, for the exact same reason, and to get some entertainment. It's a fun and easy project that yields immediate results. It's one of the projects from this book I can't wait to do again with my future grandkids. Chapter 7. Make your own weapons and traps. In a time of crisis, simple resources like food, water, and energy become precious commodities. Some people, however, will take a different route than you and invest their time and energy in taking those resources from others. You'll need to protect what you built from previous chapters. Now, unfortunately, you won't find a recipe to make your own gun in this chapter, but there are a few interesting recipes for when you can't get your hands on one or when ammo is in limited supply. Or, for after the government has come knocking on your door to seize your guns. In our final chapter, you'll find some useful and, to be honest, fun projects, some of which take less than 30 minutes to make. I'll have you know, I used the tripwire hack all around the cabin in case those firewood thieves ever come back. Also, note, some of these projects are also useful for hunting. Here's a glimpse at them. My dad's homemade crossbow. Great for when you run out of ammo and need to keep assailants at a distance. Or use it to hunt in silence and replenish your food supplies. I'm also teaching my kids to hunt with it, which is a great way to introduce traditional hunting methods to the young. A tripwire trap. That way, when an intruder enters your perimeter and trips this trap, you'll be waiting for him with a do-it-yourself flamethrower. Also used to kill unwanted weeds and wasp nests. And 5 more designs that will make your off-grid location inaccessible for intruders. To celebrate the launch of this book, we're also slapping on 3 extras. These are 3 great manuals I personally handpicked for you together with the experts at Survivopedia. What's great is each of them expands on one of the chapters in the Survival Sanctuary, so you can bring your projects to the next level. But here's the catch. Currently, there's only one way to get them. See, that's not sold anywhere else anymore. But For a limited time only, we managed to bring them back. And the good news is, we're giving them away for free. As I said, this is a special launch celebration. So, if you want these 3 guides for free, our accountants say we're insane for doing this. You'd best get them now, because I'm not sure if we'll ever offer them again. Bonus number 1, the Shoebox Garden. Free. Our first free bonus shows you how to create a steady food supply when space is limited. This is especially valuable in urban areas, like the suburbs, and in cities. When a crisis hits an urban area, the first thing that becomes scarce is food. Therefore, it's vital to have a backup in place. Even a small garden the size of a shoebox can potentially buy you vital time before rescue arrives. But even if you don't live in an urban area, this book is a great guide to get you started with gardening on a small scale. Or if you have family or friends living in the city, why not give them this book? When the need arises and food supplies take a hit, they'll thank you for it. I gave this book to my sister, who lives in the city, and now she's giving me fresh tomatoes every month. They're great. Bonus number 2, My American Castle. Free. This second manual will do 2 things: educate and entertain you. There were several sections that actually made me laugh out loud when I read them. But the actual techniques inside, straight out of Nam, are no laughing matter. Read carefully, as this Vietnam vet shows you how to make your house or bug-out location into a fortress every roaming bandit and looter will fear. It has things like the biggest mistakes home invasion victims make, 3 ways to prevent home invasions from happening, and 7 easy DIY booby traps. The tips in My American Castle go great with Chapter 7 of Survival Sanctuary, which will show you how to make weapons and traps. However, My American Castle goes further by telling you exactly how to use them. I know one thing for sure. If the kid from Home Alone had read this book, the bad guys in the movie wouldn't have been in Home Alone 2. Bonus 3, the Home Energy Rescue Plan. Free. What do you do after you create something that generates electricity from the first chapter of Survival Sanctuary? You need to store that electricity. Want to know how? Then this is the book for you. Our third and final bonus shows you exactly which batteries to use in a survival situation and which ones to avoid. Spoiler, it's a lot of the modern ones. With this guide, you'll be able to jumpstart your energy independence right away. Start small by storing energy in batteries, and you'll already be more independent than your yesterday self. Now remember, we're only offering these 3 great bonuses for a limited time only, since you can't keep giving them away for free. And we don't know how long we'll be able to keep it that way. So really, your only sure bet of having them is by ordering Survival Sanctuary today. So how much is this all going to cost you? Now, we could have put all this information from Survival Sanctuary and taught it during a weekend seminar for $2,500. Easy. There's a lot of demand for this, from rich preppers who are realizing money doesn't buy bulletproof goods anymore. And we've had several requests from them in the past to be taught our DIY skills in private, for which they were ready to pay large amounts of cash. But up till now, we've always said no, and decided not to do that $2,500 seminar, because we want every hardworking American to apply this information and be able to say no to greedy businesses who want to dig in their pockets. That's why we decided, in accordance with our accountants, to settle on $50 for Survival Sanctuary, which is a steal if you consider collecting all the info in the guide personally set me back thousands of dollars. But hang on, this may blow your mind, because as you may remember, this video marks our launch celebration. And so, we're giving a huge discount on Survival Sanctuary by not just including the 3 bonuses: the Shoebox Garden, My American Castle, the Home Energy Rescue Plan, which totals to $81. But as I said, you are getting them for free today, which means you'll get it all for a single payment of just $37. Now please keep in mind, I'm not sure how much longer I will be able to keep this price up, since our accountants are pushing us to raise it to $50 again quickly. So, the only way you're guaranteed this ultra-low price is by ordering today. Once you order, you'll be directed to an order form, which is secure with military-grade encryption so that your data is 100% safe. Then, we will guide you to your purchase, which will be a digital version of the book. You can download it and read it on your computer, or print it out. The great thing about a digital book is that you can save several printed copies, so you can keep one in your home, your bug-out location, or even give some copies to friends and loved ones. My kids are all about smartphones and e-readers now, so they love this kind of stuff. Luckily, it's just as simple to use as a book. Still worried? Well then, let me reassure you. Because even if you don't like the book, or somehow the projects don't work for you, then send me or our support team an email within 60 days of your purchase, and we will refund you 100% of your money. No questions asked. You'll even get to keep the digital copy of the book and bonuses, so I'm actually taking more of a risk, since you could take $131 worth of books straight out of my wallet. So, the way I see it, you now have 3 options. A. You decide to ignore this letter for now and keep depending on essential things that will break, like store-bought electronics, government utilities, and food services. And this is fine for some people, right? I mean, this is what we've been doing all this time. I'll be honest with you. I wish all of this wasn't necessary, that everything just stayed as it is and products never failed. But one day, you may get the same wake-up call I did in the cabin, and to be frank, that's not a situation I wish on you. In short, this is the best option if you believe that everything will stay the way it is now. You will never be hit by a natural disaster. The government will always take care of you, and Plan B products will never fail you. B. You know self-reliance is key, so you're going to replace fragile commercial products with your own DIY products. But instead of paying $37 for a shortcut that will tell you the right way to do it from the get-go, you will figure it out on your own. This is what I tried before I got my dad's book. But I never got around to doing it because it took so much effort and time to find out on my own. If I had Survival Sanctuary from the get-go 9 years ago, I would have gotten so much further by now than I am today. C. You know self-reliance is key. That companies use things like planned obsolescence to make you dependent on them. But time is limited, so you choose to pay $37, less than a single tank of gas, for a guide that'll show you the ropes and give you a head start. Remember, this is what you get. Survival Sanctuary, a condensed DIY off-grid Bible with tons of detailed illustrations and blueprints, simple explanations, and clear measurements. Featuring tried and tested designs that I've adapted myself to be more robust, easier to repair, and most of all, are simple and cheap to build. Plus, 3 useful guides you get on top for free. All of this will be yours for the low price of $37. Keep in mind, I can't keep this offer up for long, and I'm being pressured to bring it up to $50 again soon. So, if you want to access and download these 25 quick and easy projects, plus 3 free bonus manuals for the lowest possible price, I suggest you do it now while this video is still up. Thanks for your attention. James Miller. Frequently asked questions. I'm not a handy person. Is this book still for me? Yes, definitely. This book is very beginner-friendly with clear diagrams and instructions. It doesn't use any so-called DIY lingo, so it's not reserved for elite handymen. Even if you're faced with a more difficult project in this book, there's nearly always an easier alternative in the same chapter. For example, if the improvised generator made from car parts is a bit too complicated for you, then I'd advise you to start with the wind turbine or water wheel. Like I said, you don't want to be dependent on one source, but if you just build one of these already, you're already better off in an emergency than 99% of the population. Here's an extra hint. Just print out the pages of the project you want to start with and go to your local hardware store. Show it to a helpful employee and ask them for help. They can help you get all the requirements for the project so you can get started straight away. I've tried other DIY guides before, but wasn't happy with them. What makes this one different? I was in the same boat. I had read plenty of DIY guides and posts on the internet, and most of them didn't motivate me to start my own projects. This is because these guides often say what you should do, but they neglect to say how to do it. They also made me feel like an idiot by using big words and technical terms I couldn't understand. Even Lex, our architect, told me these guides are unnecessarily complicated. That's why I wanted to put a guide out that did things differently, and instead make the process as easy as possible for the reader, So easy, in fact, even a teenager could pick up this book and start tinkering. I don't have a lot of time, and 25 projects sound like a lot. Do I need to do them all? I would recommend doing at least one project per chapter. But don't rush it. Building this stuff is part of the enjoyment. Some of the projects can be completed in less than an hour. Some might take you an afternoon, but none of them require more than a few leisurely afternoons. Buying the tools, the raw materials, isn't that expensive? No, not at all. First, the book itself is just $37. Now, for some people, including myself, that is a lot of money. But see it as buying a tank of gas, which is more than $37. You put gas in your car because you want to go somewhere. Same with this book. You buy it because you have a goal. You're driving on the road towards independence. The tools are not specialized. They are common things like hammers, screwdrivers, drills. The stuff you need to have in your house anyway. As for the raw material to build the stuff with, these are all cheap, but good quality materials. Nothing fancy or expensive, because it's all about being able to repair and replace parts with materials you can find lying around. I'm not in America. Can I still use this book? Absolutely. Whether you're in North America, South America, Europe, or any of the other continents, except perhaps Antarctica, you can build the projects in this book, but make sure to double check with the laws in your country or state before you build certain projects to see if it's legal. The instructions in this book are in simple English, and we use both imperial and metric units everywhere. And no matter where you live in the inhabited world, you can get the needed material and tools for these projects in most hardware stores around the globe. That's how commonplace they are. The book is digital, so it requires no shipping. As soon as you order it, you are able to download it on the spot. Hey James, why isn't your name on the cover? Well, as much as I'd like to put it there, it just didn't feel right. It was my old man who started it. I just picked it up and passed it on. What's more, Lex and Mark are the real experts, not me. They're the eggheads who made the book, updated the designs, and checked everything for safety. But me, I'm just an everyday guy. Without them, this book wouldn't have even been possible. They spent months on it. It was a colossal effort. They're the real authors. That's why, as a final farewell, I'd like to thank them both for helping me out. God bless.